Hello, hello, and welcome to Relationship Rhetoric. I'm your host, Unapologetically Angela, and I'm beginning a series on self awareness. Those of you that know me, I am on this journey, this actual research journey on self awareness. And I have stumbled upon some amazing people who I want to be like when I grow up because they've been doing this a lot longer than I have. Not only have they been doing it longer than I have, but they have the blessing of taking their children and their family along with this journey. And just watching these people move and how they flow in this, and they make it seem so easy. But me being me, as curious as I am, I'm just wanting to know how the journey started, how is it affecting their lifestyle and their children, and what have they learned about themselves. So I'm really, really grateful that I have a few people who are willing to speak and share and be a part of this research process. So the first person that I asked has really been a person that gave me the most productive advice that I've had since I've been here. A lot of you may not know I'm now in Egypt teaching abroad. And this young lady told me to stay under the radar. And I have to remind myself of that when I find myself getting irritated or, wanting to talk too much or whatever. That has stuck in my mind since she first told me that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Mrs. Andrea Thomas. I pronounced it right, didn't I?
Andrea.
Andrea.
Yes.
The kids got me so, you know how they have the audacity to try to correct
you. Yes.
Because my name is not Angela, it's Miss Angela. Anyway.
Because of the
Not worried. Okay, so thank you so much for doing this. Let me just give you a little background information about what you're about to do. I have a podcast called Relationship Rhetoric, and I talk to people. I have been talking to people for a while just to hear their story and how they came to be who they are today.
Okay.
And like I said in the intro, I have really been impressed by how you move. Even on your days when you seem to be upset, you still, your lipstick be popping, your eyeshadow, and you just
I have to do whatever it takes to make myself feel like you can do this on the days when I really don't want to do it. So if anything, that's more for me than anything else.
I got you. Okay, so Andrea, how did this start? Where are you from? Were you teaching in the district you were from, and what motivated you to start teaching abroad?
Okay, I taught in the States for 10 years. And I have a bachelor's and a master's both in education. So I was experienced. I knew education. I knew how to teach. I knew what I was doing. I just was not fulfilled teaching in the States. And so I got out of the classroom for a year, and I decided to take a job as an assistant director at a Montessori childhood center in the state of Alabama. And it was okay. It was a break out of the classroom, but the pay was just not, it just wasn't there. I enjoyed the position out of the classroom, but then at the same time, working with adults, I just started to feel like working with adults is just not for me. Like maybe I do want to be back in the classroom, but just in a different aspect. And so it's just is really a coincidence how it happened. I'm in a travel group for Black people on Facebook called the Black Travel Movement. And so it's a group with hundreds of thousands of people in it for Black Americans or Black people in general who like to travel. They travel, they share pictures, they share recommendations of where to go for places. It's an amazing group. So anyway, one random day I was in the group and I saw a post from a Black guy from Alabama who was teaching in China. And he had posted pictures of China and how he was working there and he was teaching there and blah, blah, blah. And he went on and on. So after I read his post, I clicked on his profile and I saw that we had a mutual friend, which is one of my first cousins, and said, okay, I said, okay, well, this guy is not a total stranger. He's a stranger, but it's like, okay, we have some kind of a connection. And so I said, okay, I'm just going to go out on a limb and send him a message to see what kind of information he can give me. And I sent him a message and he responded and told me every single thing on how to teach abroad, how to get us started. He gave me recommendations for Facebook groups for Black Americans who were living and working abroad. And when he told me everything there was to know, I just jumped right on it and I started applying. I was applying for hundreds of jobs in a week, doing interviews in the middle of the night because of the time difference.
Yeah.
So all the jobs that I was applying for, here it was in the morning, but at home it was like 2:00 in the morning, 3:00 in the morning. I would do the interviews and then get up and still go to work the next day. So that was really that's how it came about. Like I said, I knew I had a passion for travel. And I just felt like as a family, I knew that was something that we wanted to do, but we just weren't in a position to be able to do that at home. And so the opportunity to teach abroad, it gave, it's an opportunity to be able to travel, still stay within our fields. And I feel like it helped us to become closer as a family.
So one of the things that I was really, really concerned about when I started doing this was giving up my retirement and giving up the things that teaching in the States gave me. Did that even cross your mind when you left the school system?
It did not, because I knew so many teachers. Like I said, I taught for 10 years. So I taught in 2 different schools. One, I was still teaching for 10 years in the States. I taught in a low income Black American school district. And then I taught in a low income county, which was majority white Americans. And so I would see teachers all different ages, all different backgrounds, whether they were new, just starting out, or they had been teaching for a long time. And financially, their stories just all sounded the same, whether they were nearing retirement age, or they were married, or they were single. It was like talking to all these different teachers over the years, the stories just sounded the same no matter how I heard it. I'm struggling, I'm about to retire, and I still need to find a second job. I'm a teacher and I work all day and I have a second job, at the bank when they leave teaching. And it just sounded exhausting to me. And I just said, there has got to be another way. And so it was in the back of my mind, but it wasn't enough to deter me from not pursuing the opportunity of teaching abroad.
Okay. All right. So what was your first assignment? What was the first? No, let's go back. How did you feel when you got your first offer?
I was shocked. I didn't know anything about Kuwait at all. Actually, the first offer came from Dubai, and this was in 2017. And they sent me the offer letter, and then I was like, okay, and this is really, it was scary at the time, but now I feel like it just prepared us for where we were. I got the offer for a job in Dubai, and we had sold everything. Like, we sold everything in our apartment, the car, everything was out of the apartment and gone. So we were with my in-laws which was supposed to be like a few weeks before we got ready to go to Dubai. All of a sudden, and I was excited. We were like, oh my gosh, we're going to Dubai. We were so excited. And then all of a sudden, which again, I had researched enough, so I knew that this could happen. The school sent me an email and just said, hey, our school is in the red, and all of a sudden we are no longer offering you the position. No further explanation, no anything else. I'm like, oh my gosh, we sold everything. What are we gonna do? We have to figure this out. It was like pure panic. And then I just kept applying and kept applying. Again, I was just like, okay, we're already halfway there. This can't be a moment to where we're just like, okay, we're just going to stay here. So I kept applying, I kept interviewing, and then I started to realize this is not as hard as it seems to get a job abroad. And then I kept applying, and eventually I landed the position in Kuwait.
Okay. And how was that? How was the Kuwaiti experience?
It was the most culturally shocking thing I have probably ever experienced. I remember, even though that was in 2017, I can still feel how I felt when I got to the airport. And because I went alone, I wanted to go first. And so my husband and I agreed that since the school was because the school flew me out. And they just suggested that, hey, maybe you should come out first because it's a culture shock. And I think the school knew that. And they just said, hey, we think maybe you should come out first and then just see and then bring your family out later. And a lot of people do that. So we were okay with that. So I arrived in Kuwait all alone. That was my first time on an airplane ever in 30 something years of life. And when I arrived at the airport, I remember looking around and I saw all these Arabic women and they were all covered up. And I saw the men in all their clothes. And I remember I was standing in the airport with my luggage and I was just looking around like, oh my gosh, what did I do? I initially felt like that. It was so hot. And actually the first day of school, I think it was a combination of the culture shock and the heat. I fainted. It was a lot. I remember I started to feel really hot, like it gets to 140 degrees in Kuwait in the summertime. And our school in the gym, there was no ceiling. So the entire gym always felt like you were standing outside in the heat. And then I was new, like I said, it was the first day, and the teacher on my team, she was standing next to me. And I was like, hey, can you tell me how to get upstairs so that I can get to my water? Because the school was huge. I turned around, she was like, oh, you just go up the stairs. I turned around to walk up the stairs to go get my water. And the next thing I know, I was being like picked up off the floor. So I think it was just a combination of everything, like the culture shock, the heat, not paying attention to how much water I was drinking. So it was a lot, but eventually, you know, Kuwait is a very interesting place to be. We found our groove and, you know, we stayed there for 3 years.
So how long after you getting settled was it before the family came over?
They came over about 3 months after I did. After I landed and arrived and started working, they came over about 3 months later.
Okay. Did your children go to the same school you worked at?
No, they went to a different school. I taught at a school that was for all Kuwaitis. And I just, at the time, I just felt like that was not a good fit for them. And so I chose to put them at an international school, and it was a true international school. It's like a lot of the schools in the Middle East, in the region, they will say international, but it's just international because international is in the name of the school and not necessarily because it's an international population. And so I put them at another school, but it was international and they had kids from all over the place. So they didn't go to school where I worked.
Okay. So of the two children, who adjusted the fastest?
Well, Aubrey was only 2 at the time.
Oh, okay.
So he didn't even realize, you know, that anything, you know, was different going on other than they got on an airplane for the first time. And then we're in a new apartment and we're going, you know, to these grand malls. If Kuwait doesn't do anything else, they know how to do a mall. I have never seen any malls anywhere else that we've traveled to that can compare to the malls in Kuwait. And so that's all he knew. That's all he saw is that, you know, the malls are beautiful, it's extravagant, it's extreme. And, you know, he noticed things, but I feel like because he was the smallest, it was easier for him to just adjust versus Lauren, who was older. And so she was much more aware of what was going on around us.
Okay. Okay. How did your husband adjust?
The first reaction was to our apartment. And the apartments in Kuwait, even though the apartments here in Egypt are older, the apartments in Kuwait are also old. And so when he walked into the apartment for the first time, his reaction was exactly the same as my reaction. Like I was just looking around like, it was clean and it was an apartment, but when you go from the States to Kuwait, it's like taking a step back 100 years in time. The same way I feel sometimes when we are here in Cairo. So I feel like once he got over the accommodations weren't terrible, they weren't horrible. It was just different from what we were used to. But I felt like once he got over that and he started to see what Kuwait had to offer as a country and for expats, then it became easier for him to adjust. But it was just the accommodation, just the shock of the difference between the States and a Middle Eastern style apartment.
So being there, did they have something equivalent to the mommy Tommy situation? Did your body have to adjust?
No. There was nothing like that at all. Like I said, the only thing body-wise, the only thing that I felt was to increase my water. And that was because it was so hot because of the heat. So even though we've been there, even when we got to Abu Dhabi 3 years later, and I would hear people say, oh my goodness, it's so hot. Oh my goodness, the heat. I'm like, this is nothing. The heat in Kuwait is, like I said, it gets up to 140, and that's the norm in the summertime. I mean, that is just.
Does 140 degrees feel like?
It feels like you are walking in an oven. It feels like when you open the oven up and that first wave of heat just hits you, it feels like you're walking in that all day long.
Oh,
Even at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, it's still 130 degrees outside, still 120 degrees outside. It's hot. It's just hot. So I feel like body wise, you know for a fact you are drinking water all day long. If not, you will feel the effects of not drinking enough water.
wow. Does Kuwait have all the seasons, or is it just hot all year round?
They have two: extreme heat and extreme cold.
Oh.
In the summertime, like I said, it's boiling, and in the wintertime, it is absolutely freezing. It's freezing. So there is no fall and there is no spring. It's either very hot or very cold.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So along this process, this is year 5 of you traveling and teaching. Okay. What have you
Yes.
learned about yourself in this process?
That I'm American.
Okay.
I feel like we didn't realize that of course we're American, but I feel like it wasn't so important until we left America. For the most part, nobody cared for the most part that we're Black. People just care that we're American. No matter where we have traveled to, what country we have been to, I'm not saying that nobody cared, or I'm not saying maybe there haven't been like little small passive aggressive things because we are Black, but most people want to have conversations about the fact that we are American. Yes, because we're American. So if anybody asks anything else, what have you become more aware of? What have you noticed? What do people seem to want to talk about? It's always that you're American. It's always American politics. No matter what country we've gone to, when we used to get into the taxis in Kuwait, the taxi drivers always wanted to talk about American politics. They always wanted to talk about Trump. They always wanted to talk about Obama. Always. Yes, we went to Amsterdam one time on a trip, as a lot of us went, like maybe 10, 11 of us, 3 families with kids included. And we walked into a bar one time, and this bartender in Amsterdam basically screams out like a very like inappropriate word about Trump. And we were just standing there like we were so shocked. Like we just walked into the bar and he was just so upset that Trump was president. And we just was like, sir, we don't care anything about that. We're not political. We just came in here to sit down and have a drink. Can we just get our drink? But he ended up being really nice. But again, it was another political conversation that had come up with a complete stranger once people find out that you're American.
Wow.
Yep.
And so typically, because what I've noticed here, what has been the determining factor that you're American?
So before we moved to Kuwait, again, most people in my circle back home don't know anything about the Middle East other than what they show us on the media. So they're showing things being blown up. They're showing bombs. They're showing wars from like 50, 60 years ago. And so that is what is in our mind of what the Middle East is. And when we got to Kuwait, and my mother-in-law, like I said, she passed away a few months ago. She was like, y'all aren't gonna like it, and telling the kids, oh, they eat this over there, and y'all aren't gonna have foods that you normally have, and you won't have this, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. And we got there, and it was literally the complete opposite of what everybody had tried to put into our heads of what Kuwait was. Like I said, Kuwait is not a fun country. You have to make your fun. It's not easy to have fun in Kuwait. You either have fun because you do things that aren't legal, not as in, drugs or anything, but alcohol is not legal there, so you have to find your fun. You have to make your fun. But when we got there, we just realized that Americans could do whatever they wanted. Americans could do whatever they wanted. They would, if there was a long line, and when I say a long line, I mean, maybe for whatever reason, 200 people in the line, the immigration officers or whoever was in charge, they would just go down the line at any point in time and say, we need to see your passport. Like maybe they know that when you get to the front of the line, you're going to need your passport anyway, so you should have it ready. As soon as they saw that you had a blue American passport, they would send you to the front of the line. They would just say, go to the front of the line. Or if there was a shorter line over there, they just say, you can go to that line, or you don't even have to do this process. Whatever the process was, they just say, don't even worry about it. Just fine. You're fine to go without. So when we got there, we started to realize being an American has some privileges outside of America.
Right.
Outside of America, yes. And then another thing is you start to hear stories from other nationalities of people who have passports that aren't American passports, and you hear the things that they have to go through to travel to certain countries. Americans, we can just show up in any country. You don't need to apply ahead of time. You just show up and you say, okay, I'm in, wherever you are, whatever country that it is, we're here. We want to pay to get a visa to enter the country. And you do that as soon as you land. And then you start talking to other people who work with you internationally, and they say, oh, we have to go to this office. We have to pay this crazy amount of money to have somebody apply for us because I'm South African or I'm Egyptian and I can't easily go. And they will say, you guys are so privileged because you have an American passport. But we weren't traveling when we were living in America, so we wouldn't have known that. So once we moved, you start to hear and see and experience the privileges of having that blue passport.
Wow. Wow. How has it been finding things for the kids to do?
In Kuwait, it was extremely difficult because everything in Kuwait, Kuwait is a very it's not for socializing. It's a very, very family oriented type country to live in. And it's still do everything at night, stay in the house in the daytime because of the heat. Mm-hmm. And so it was easy to find things for the kids to do in Kuwait. For adults, not so much. Like I said, you have to always be looking and searching and digging and know this person and know that person. Like I said, simple things in Kuwait are illegal. Having a party is illegal. The police can show up at any time and shut the whole entire thing down. The alcohol is illegal in Kuwait. Most of the times they would take the alcohol and keep it, or, they're not going to take, most of the time, if you're American, they're not going to take anybody to jail. They would just tell you to break. So for adults in Kuwait, very difficult to socialize. For kids, it's family oriented. So you can take the kids to the park at midnight and the park is jumping like it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon. So it was easy for them. And then we moved to Abu Dhabi and it was like a playground for kids and adults. Whatever you dream, whatever you think you can do, you want to do, it is there and it is easily accessible, easily. So it was, it hasn't been hard to find things because they're kids. And I feel like I always hear people say, like, I'm in different travel groups on Facebook, and I'll hear people say, and they'll post in a group, hey, we're traveling to, this country or whatever. What is there for kids to do? Do you think this is a country that kids can go? And then people started to come in and say, people live there with their kids. So no matter what country you go to, you're going to find something because people have kids and they live there. So once you kind of adapt that mindset, then you realize no matter where you go, there will be things for kids to do, whether you have to dig and find or whether they put it out there and make it easily accessible. So that has never been like a hurdle for us to jump over. Like the kids always have something to do.
Okay. So if someone said to you, what has been the greatest part about living abroad, what would it be?
The traveling. And that's only because we've always wanted to travel, always. And I just, now that I think back, I'm like, when we were home, we were doing all these different things at the time that we thought would put us on the path to assist us in being able to travel. Oh, let's try to do this on the side. Oh, let's start a business and do this. Oh, let's do this. And while those things were successful in some aspects, I didn't feel like was leading us on the path to what we really wanted to do, and that was to be able to travel as a family. So I feel like on those days that I don't feel like it, I'm tired, I've had a bad experience, or just overall just missing home, or feeling like, okay, is this the time for us to go back home? Is this the year we're going to go back home? It's like you're finally getting the chance to do what you've always wanted to do. And so I try to keep that in mind, and we are just going to enjoy the ride for as long as we can.
Okay. And so what would you say has been the hardest part?
Being away from friends and family. Yeah. I don't make friends very easily. And so the friends that I do have, I have been friends with them since the 9th grade. And so it was a very emotional, and they're in my hometown. So it was a very emotional departure when we left. And so I've seen them twice. I've been home twice since we left in 2017, and it still feels the same every single time it's time to leave. There are tears, there are crying, because we've been friends for so long. And I realize when I see them, or even when you see family, you're missing things. You know, people are going on with their lives. People are having babies, getting married, you know, getting new jobs. And although you get there and it's like, oh my gosh, you know, I haven't seen my family and friends in 2 years, it's like, there's not enough time. If you're going home for the summer for a few weeks, you can't get caught up on everything that you've missed since you've been gone. So I feel like you have to work extra hard to keep those relationships alive, because otherwise the distance will end the relationships. Like, I've seen it so many times. I hear stories from so many expats saying, you know, people who they thought were friends didn't reach out to them, or people who said they were going to travel to come and see them never came to see them, or family kept saying, oh, I'm going to come, and they never come. And so I know, I just always keep in the back of my mind, like, people tell me that all the time, I'm going to come over there, I'm coming to see you, you know, whatever. But these are people that are very close to me. And I knew, you know, your financial situation before we left. So I don't expect a miracle and for you to just all of a sudden be able to jump on the airplane, you know, and fly to Egypt. So I feel like that the hardest part is, especially when you're like me and you're somewhat of an introvert, and it just is a job. It's a whole task to make sure that you are still communicating with family and still communicating with friends to try to keep those relationships alive while you're so far away.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So if you could offer advice to someone who is considering teaching abroad, who's married, who has kids, what would it be?
I think that my advice would be to talk it over with your spouse or your partner or whatever, the situation is. Talk about it with them and make sure there's something that you both agree on. And that if it's something where, if it's a position where, you know, you have to go and the partner or the spouse doesn't go, or if the spouse and the partner does come, how are they going to be okay if they aren't working? Are they going to be, are you going to be okay if, you know, both of you are working? How are you going to work if there are kids involved? So I think just communicating with them and just making sure that you are both on the same page. And that's in aspects to if there is a spouse or a partner. When it comes to kids, I think what I can say for kids is the kids can't socialize by themselves. You know, they can't reach out to people. They can't find other, if they're not in school, they can't, you know, they can't do that on their own. So sometimes I have to tell myself, okay, I don't feel like it. I don't want to, but it's my responsibility as a parent to make sure that they are able to socialize. So I have to put myself out there and connect with people who have kids so that I can make sure that my kids also have some sense of normalcy and that they're able to socialize as well.
Okay. And you do a great job of that, if I might say. You really do.
I try.
Okay, well, thank you so much. This was painless, but it was very, I think it was necessary. There's not a lot of us, you know what I'm saying, that are actually doing this.
There isn't. It seems like there are so many. Like I said, I'm in 2 groups on Facebook. One of them is, or a couple of groups, but one of the main ones is called Black Americans Living Abroad. And it's just a Facebook group where we go to talk, we go to vent. That was actually one of the first Facebook groups that the guy from China that I saw on Facebook that he had recommended to me. And so I joined the group, and it's people, Black Americans, they're everywhere. They live all over the world. And even for certain countries, you know, Black Americans living in Cairo, Black Americans in Kuwait, Black Americans living, you know, in all different places. But when you get in the group, it seems like it's a lot of people. You're like, oh my gosh, it's so many people. You know, it seems like a lot collectively. But then when you get to a country and you spread us out everywhere, then you realize this is not that many of us. You know, this is not a lot of people. You know, it seems like a lot collectively. Really, it's not.
Yeah.
And I think I even realized that more when we went to the UAE. You would see so many Black people have brunches specifically for Black people. It would be, I mean, it was in the name, it was in the title. It was brunches created by us for us. And it would literally be some of the best times of your life. You would get there and you would instantly feel a connection with these complete strangers that you were just meeting for the first time, and you would get there and make so many friends. People would reach out. They would, I mean, it was an amazing. But you would see all of us at these brunches, so many of us, it seemed like, okay, it's 100, 200 people here. But then you get out and you go places and you rarely run into a Black American anywhere. Maybe you see one in the mall. Maybe you see one here. So together we look like a lot. But when you spread us out, there's not a lot.
I agree totally. Well, thank you so much. We got to prepare for our our work day tomorrow. But I thank you for sharing. Have you done your reading?
We do. You are so welcome. I have not. I haven't.
Okay. Well, that's what I'm about to do.
I think I'm just going to try to wing it when I get in there. I'm just going to wing this.
Well, we got to have something submitted before 3:30.
I'm about to take it. Go ahead.
We have to have something submitted before 3:30 tomorrow.
I think there is your screen is for, oh, there we are. I'm sorry. Okay. What'd you say?
We have something that we have to submit before 3:30.
I think the screen is frozen all the way.
Okay. Can you see me?
All right. There, it's like it's going in. I can see you, but the screen is, oh, there we are. Okay. Now I can see you.
Can you hear me?
The connection is really bad. It's going in. I can't hear you now, and then it freezes up, and then I can hear you, and then it's freezing. So it's like in and out, but I'm pretty sure it's
so
the connection.
We're gonna say good night.
Yes, I think we should just end this on a good note. It gave us 30 minutes, which is good for Egypt, from what I hear, because we just gonna take the 32 minutes and we got it.
That's right. Good night. I'll see you tomorrow. She's still, listen, here in Egypt, honey, you have to get what you can get with this Wi-Fi and in these concrete walls. We get what we can. But thank you so much, Andrea, for sharing with me. And I hope that this is well received for anyone who is interested in traveling abroad and getting to know themselves better and pushing yourself to the limit. I will share quite a few interviews with you just to give you a taste of what traveling abroad looks like. Have a wonderful night.